Hey everyone, Dave here from Torchlight with our first Conquest painting video. Today I'm going to be showing you guys how I painted the Household Knight from the Conquest 2-player starter box. Now this is my favorite model from the Hundred Kingdoms side for sure. And since this is a high fantasy game with a lot of flashy model designs, I'm going to be using a lot of bright, contrasting colors. I'm going to show you guys how to combine airbrush fades with edge highlights to paint some fantastic three-dimensional surfaces. Since we're going to be painting a lot of bright colors, you'll want to start with a white or light gray primer, and we'll also use the airbrush to paint the metal parts while we're at it. This model has a lot of armor. I used Vallejo's Mecha Steel, which is a fine mid-tone metallic color. Once the metal is done, let's paint the bigger surfaces, which is the cloth skirts around the side of the horse. My paint scheme for the faction so far has been red and yellow, so I'm going to start with Citadel's Mephiston red on the side skirts. The skirts around the back will do a dark gray, and for that I mixed Vallejo's somber gray and black until I got a consistency I was happy with, so it was about half and half. And after those are dry, we're going to use some black shade to give it some contrast. I mixed half and half of Nuln Oil and Lamian Medium, both from Citadel, and you're going to want to use the shade on the silver parts as well. Okay, time to start with the airbrush fades. Since the model is nice and big, it makes it a lot easier to tape off the areas that you don't want to get paint onto. So for the fades, you want to pick a color that is a few tones brighter than the base coat that you used. For the red here, I used Vallejo's Mecha Red, and you want to pick a direction. In this case, I picked front to back at a slight downward angle and lightly spray the brighter color on the bottom half of the surface. You want to pick this angle to make sure that you don't cover up all the shadows in the creases, and you get a nice fade on the bottom half of the cloth. And for the fade on the gray, I used a 1-to-1 mix of Vallejo's Somber Gray and Stonewall Gray. For the silver fades, I used Vallejo Mecha Light Steel. We're going to concentrate on the upper raised surfaces of the metal, and we're going to try to stay away from the transitions as much as possible. And then since most of the underside is obscured, we're going to use just airbrush black and not worry about it. Once you put it on the base, you can't really see down there, but you want to see that there's some shadow there. Okay, now back to the brush. I used Citadel Wraithbone on the skin of the horse. White paint's gonna be kind of chunky sometimes, so make sure you thin it down properly. I think I did 1 part Wraithbone with 1 part Lamian Medium, it gets really thin, so it took 4 or 5 coats to get a good smooth consistency. And then to shade the skin, I mix 1 part Agrax Earthshade with 2 parts Lamian Medium, and I just painted it all over the skin. Make sure you control how much pooling there is in the lower areas, because if there's not enough, you won't get enough contrast effects, but if there's too much, you're gonna dry with watermarks. If it doesn't turn out right, you can always go back to the Wraithbone, put a couple more coats on, and then start over with the shade. Now to add in some other colors, I kind of skipped through this. I did medium gray on the leg wraps and the tail, khaki on the hooves, and then leather brown on the reins. You want to use as many colors as possible because this is kind of a flashy model, so more colors, it stands out more. And then following my red and yellow scheme, I'm painting in the rug thing under the saddle with desert yellow. Just like white, painting yellow is kind of tricky, so what I like to do is I like to start with a light, kind of desaturated yellow, and then apply an orange shade on top of it. And once it is all dry, you get a good, kind of well-saturated yellow that doesn't take too many coats. Next, I'm gonna paint the chains, eyepiece, and a couple of other bits of metal with a darker silver. So on a model like there's a lot of metal on metal, so you can play around with different shades of metallics to give it a bit more depth. So while all of that is drying, we're gonna start painting the trim. We want it to look bright and to stand out from the silver, but still use a metallic. So I chose Retributor Armor from Citadel, and we're just gonna paint it all over the trim. Just be careful around the areas that are very thin, because with the kind of technique that we're going with, it's kind of hard to go back and fix. So just go slow and use like straight, long brushes, brush strokes. And then after that's all done, we're gonna use Reichland Flesh Shade from Citadel on the bigger areas of gold. And we're gonna thin it down 1:1 with paint medium. And then that'll give it a bit more depth. And for this, we're gonna stay away from the thinner gold bands because it's gonna run everywhere and it's not gonna look good and you're gonna have to fix it. Okay, so we have a couple more metal pieces that we need to paint. So for this, I chose a bronze or copper. I really like Screaming Bell from Citadel. It's got really good pigments, so I used it here on kind of the I guess, bangles hanging off the side of the back armor. And finally, it's time to do some brush highlights. Since we already did a fade with the airbrush, all you need to do at this point is to pick a bright color and lightly highlight the most raised surfaces. So for the cloth section here, it's already faded red, so just pick some lines and contours and draw very thin lines with a bright highlight color. Note that the closer we get to the bottom, the more passes I make with the brush. This is just to make it in line with the fade that we already did. For the base of the model, I kind of went for a grassy field. I started with a texture paint, which is thick mud from Vallejo, and once that's dry, just paint it brown. And then after that, I used non-oil shade all over it just to give it a bit more depth. And finally, finishing touch on the base, just glue some tufts on. As many as few as you like. I kind of tend to spread them around a bit more evenly, but it's up to you. Now onto the knight himself. I kind of sped through this because I follow the same steps as the horse. You know, paint white, prime white, airbrush silver, and then shade with a thin down black wash. I painted the cape red to match the horse's side skirts. The rest of the steps are pretty much in line with the horse. And yeah, so pick whatever colors you want and have fun with it. So there you have it, a household knight from the 100 Kingdoms of Conquest. I don't typically paint a lot of fantasy models, so this one was a real treat. I'm probably going to paint the other two knights in the set a different color scheme because they feel like characters, so I feel like they should have their own kind of heraldry and their own color scheme and their own kind of banners and stuff like that. If you want more Conquest, gaming, or hobby content, please make sure to hit that subscribe button. We're going to be doing a lot more painting videos. I think the Abomination will be next. I really, really love that model as well. And we'll also be playing a few test games to learn the rules, so stay tuned. I want to thank Sarah Austin, who edited this video for us. She managed to turn my dimly lit shaky cam into a professional looking painting video, so big props to her. I also want to give a shout out to our sponsors on Patreon, Dan Murray, Eve Kusk, Mike Story, Callum O'Malley, Dave Vino, and Artemage84. Thank you guys so much, and if you want to support us, hit the link in the description below, and that will take you to our Patreon. Stay tuned for more Conquest in the next couple of days, and as always, thank you guys, and see you next time.